Hello everyone, how's it going? Happy holidays. Unfortunately, this isn't so happy news. EA rejected recent Dead Space 4 pitch, original creators say. Now, I'm a huge fan of Dead Space. I have 100% in every mainline entry, and I've wanted to see a Dead Space 4 for so long. It's been over a decade since Dead Space 3 launched, and Glenn Schofield has stated what he thought Dead Space 4 would have been like if he would have gone forward with the project. Dead Space 3 was set up for failure by EA, had unrealistic sales goals. They tried to make it more to like a Call of Duty action horror survival game where they implemented microtransactions in the single player cooperative game, and it was just an absolute crap show. Like, for example, what Dead Space 4, according to Schofield, was going to be like, the creator of Dead Space, is that you would go from ship to ship, similar to the side missions in Dead Space 3, gathering resources during this apocalyptic situation, and eventually you'd reach story thresholds and go forward from there. But the biggest thing would have been the main enemy, which he said would have been the devil you know was better than the devil you don't, hinted at something even worse than the Brother in Moons, which is interesting. But let's go into the article. The original creators of the much-loved sci-fi horror video game Dead Space say they pitched EA on Dead Space 4 this year, only for the publisher to say it wasn't interested. In an interview with Dan Allen Gaiman, Glenn Schofield, Christopher Stone, and Brett Roberts, three of the leading creatives at the now-shuttered original Dead Space developer EA Redwood Shores Visual Games, revealed they all joined together to pitch EA on Dead Space 4. We tried, actually, the three of us, Schofield revealed. Dead Space 4 were talking this year. Unfortunately for Dead Space fans, EA said it wasn't interested. With Schofield's suggestion, projections for how much Dead Space 4 would have to sell to make the venture worthwhile were perhaps a key factor in the decision. We didn't go too deep, Schofield explained. They just said, we're not interested in it right now, we appreciate it, blah blah blah, and we know who to talk to. So we didn't take it any further, and we respected their opinion. They know their numbers and what they have to ship and all that, so yeah. Stone added that the video game industry's high-profile struggles and subsequent risk aversion has made projects such as Dead Space 4 a particularly hard sell. The industry is in a weird place right now. People are very hesitant to take chances on things, so they got to take it with a grain of salt. Who knows, maybe one day I think they would love to do it. Yeah, Schofield continued, we got ideas, I would make a Dead Space 4, Stone declared. Alas, it sounds like Dead Space 4 is an unlikely project, with EA focused on its enormously successful sports games, The Sims, the revival of Battlefield, and Respawn's ongoing projects, including the third Star Wars Jedi game. BioWare recently released Dragon Age Veilguard, the Veilguard, and working on Mass Effect 5. Now, EA released the well-received Dead Space remake in 2023. Oh, that's just like whatever. But yeah, so this is the full interview if you want to watch it here. But so why would they reject this idea? Well, first off, it is EA, so a lot of people have negative opinions about them, but EA has invested into single player games before. Like I said, like the article stated, Dead Space remake was incredibly popular among fans, and a lot of people enjoyed it. Whether it did successfully or was successful or not is still up in the air. There were rumors that apparently Dead Space didn't meet the sales expectations as they thought, and they shelved the Dead Space 2 remake, which again, we're not fully sure about, because a lot of the developers who worked on Dead Space remake were moved to Battlefield and other projects. But it could be that they're just reducing the staff and putting a skeleton crew on it. I don't know. Like, again, this has not been confirmed at the moment. And when it comes to horror games, they're a very niche franchise. They do very well during the holiday seasons, especially Halloween, which is very perplexing why they would release Dead Space on January. And January is also kind of a dead month when it comes to entertainment products, particularly movies and video games. They kind of just shove them out there for things they don't think it's going to do well. But when it comes to a game like this, like when it comes to the video game industry, I'm sure a lot of people are aware of this. Things that come out before the halfway point of the year tend to do very poorly in terms of people remembering it. Like, for example, the number one games that usually get nominated for like Game of the Year and stuff like that are released during the latter half of the year as opposed to the beginning half. People usually forget these games even released during this year. Like, for example, I saw a lot of people on X and YouTube saying that, wait, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth released this year because it came out all the way early on into the year. But EA also has a very terrible record when it comes to marketing and releasing their games. The more infamous example being, I believe it was Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 1 when Titanfall 2 released. They did up their ante when it came to Battlefield 2042, but that was also mismarketed because the final product didn't look anything like the actual product. They also did that with Anthem. But yeah, there are a lot of reasons, but we also have to look at it like this. The Kaliso Protocol. So this game released about a month before Dead Space. This was heralded as going to be the spiritual successor of Dead Space, considering like they again set up Dead Space 3 to fail. If you want to know more about this, Matt McMuscles did an incredible video. I'll leave that link below. But the Kaliso Protocol was headed by Glenn Schofield, the creator of Dead Space, and this game was bad. Let's just put it for what it is. The game launched to horrible reception. It had major issues on the PC version of the game. And yeah, it was just not a really good game. Like, it was clearly just borrowing so much from Dead Space that it literally was just in its shadow. It kind of felt like a fanfic of Dead Space. And I played it, and it was just a really, really tediously boring game with, like, the visuals look cool and the monsters look cool, but again, a lot of people just compared it to Dead Space like me. It was like the story, the enemy design, everything about it was just the worst version of Dead Space, and I think that's majorly what came into EA's decision. Like, it could be that, yeah, Dead Space Remake didn't sell what they thought it would sell. They're deciding to put the franchise on ice again, or they are making Dead Space, and well, let's get to that argument. Like, maybe it just didn't do well and they decided, you know what, we tried, didn't work out, that's it. And yeah, that is it. Or it could be that they saw what Glenn Schofield did with the Kaliso Protocol and they decided, you know what, let's not do that. Let's have the people who made Dead Space Remake go forward with this, because if you're comparing the two projects within months of one another, I think they would do that. I know a lot of people would love the creative minds of Dead Space to go forward with the franchise, and I would as well, but at the same time, you know, considering the Kaliso Protocol, how it performed, and yeah, that's a one-off game, but then there's also the Dead Space 3 situation, which that was EA's fault. They set that game up to fail because they had unrealistic sales goals for that game. On top of it, they really meddled with the game's development, put in Carver into the game because they wanted to appeal to military shooter fans, where it was very hot during that period. It's still hot with Call of Duty, but it was a lot more profound during that period, so they really wanted Carver to be in the game instead of Shadow Isaac, who is going to be a dark reflection of Isaac's trauma that only he could see. And I just find it really weird when you think about it. Like, you expected a psychological horror game to have psychological horror. I mean, it did have it in Dead Space 3. They had a very interesting element with co-op where Carver would see certain things that Isaac could not, and I thought that was a brilliant idea and an incredible way to showcase psychological horror within a co-op environment. Certain enemies were only visible to one player, and you don't know who's actually seen something that's real or not. But overall, that could be an argument that they just don't want Glenn Schofield to run the project, considering how much the Kaliso Protocol failed, or it could be that the project just didn't do well and they're just running through the same issues. Because if Dead Space was allowed to just cultivate and just be its own thing, I feel like this could have been an incredible survival horror franchise, but they pushed it out of the door. They tried to turn it into the next Resident Evil, and it just, you can't do that with a franchise. You have to let it sit, let it cultivate, and the fans will want more if you do it right, and they did do it right. But these are just all theories, and it could be that also EA just doesn't want to take the risk, considering how many people have lost their jobs during the last 2 years. Like, the gaming industry is on free fall right now. this year alone, like so many flops, so many live services cutting out, so many jobs lost, studios closing down. It's been a hellscape, so that's also a very valid argument. But it's all theories. These are my theories. I could be absolutely wrong about it. I'm just looking at the evidence provided to me. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Despite me being very negative about this, I do want a Dead Space 4. I want to see this game come out because I want to know what that what could be worse than the Brother in Moons, the possibility of what we could see to the future of Ellie, because there is a heavy hint that Isaac dies at the end of Dead Space 3, but no one can fully confirm that. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Love to hear other people's opinions. Hopefully, one day we'll get Dead Space 4 and we can get a conclusion to this franchise. At least I would prefer a conclusion rather than a cliffhanger, because at least we'll have something. At least something like Final Fantasy 13, the trilogy, how it ended. Like, a lot of people weren't happy with the ending, but I was like, at least we got an ending. Same thing for Red vs. Blue. At least we got an ending. So, yeah, that's it for me. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Like, sub, and share if you want to. If you don't, that's okay. Goodbye.